Election Day 2024 is just about here, but so are the claims of voter fraud already. We'll talk with Michigan Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson. But just what is at stake? What stands to change the most in America, depending on the winner? Today is Sunday, November 3rd, 2024, and this is Flashpoint.
Hi there, welcome to Flashpoint. We are 45 hours from the opening of polling places on Election Day in Michigan. And as you consider what will ultimately make the difference in the Harris-Trump showdown, it is complicated by the fact that so many voters have already cast their votes all over the country. For example, some Democrats were thinking that Trump rally at Madison Square Garden might move votes in their direction, but a lot of those votes were already cast by then. The converse is also true. If you liked what you heard that day, it had less of a chance to move the needle as well. So we are in largely new territory with so many voters voting early or absentee, and trying to read conclusions into the data of that early vote certainly seems like risky business. But and this was certainly predictable, there is already a fair amount of social media traffic making claims about voter fraud. Donald Trump himself already seems to be sowing seeds of doubt about the results. Coming up this morning, we're going to talk again with Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson about that early vote and about what we expect on Tuesday and when we can expect to know the winner of our most pivotal state. And the roundtable is here too. It's all today on Flashpoint. All right, Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson was with me a few weeks ago, and we promised then another update from her before Election Day, and here she is, 2 days before Election Day. Thanks very much for coming back.
Thanks for having me.
I want to start with, let's just go through a couple of problems that we've already seen, and I want to start with this Chinese national, a student at U of M, who lied about his citizenship, voted, was caught, but his vote is still going to count. Kind of assess this for me.
Yeah, well, first of all, no system is foolproof. No matter how many checks we have in place, if people lie and are determined to break the law, that happens. Because election records are public, we will find it, and we will catch whoever breaks the law and seek full accountability.
But didn't you only catch him because he tried to get his vote back?
In this case, well, yes, there were multiple things that I think are going to play out. Facts are going to play out in the weeks ahead. But the bottom line is this kid lied multiple times, not just once, even when calling back and saying, I showed a green card. So I don't want to get too many into the details. But at the same time, it shows how if someone is intent on lying or misrepresenting themselves or forging a signature or showing up with documents that are false, that can yield to fraud. And now the other thing to note is that none of this is happening on a widespread basis. It's an isolated incident. It's happened in 2018 as well with a Canadian national. And so it does happen in Georgia. They looked into this. It had happened a handful of times over a few years. In Ohio, the Ohio Attorney General found that non-citizens had voted about 5 or 6 times. So it's not a widespread incident. It's rare. We have caught it. And then those ballots have been set aside, the 40 ballots that were cast in that precinct that day, including this person's. So we'll see, again, how things unfold. But we are encouraging everyone to still have faith in the system and to know that the ballot votes will count.
But it is conceivable that if he had not tried to get his vote back, he would have not been caught, correct?
We could hypothesize that, yes, although records are public, and so people could have found that and often have afterwards. We will do audits after this election, like we do after every election, and those types of things oftentimes do come out in an audit process.
I can't imagine that you foresaw a day when you were in a Twitter battle with Elon Musk.
No.
But he is.
No one wants that.
Well, especially the guy who owns Twitter. That's probably not a great idea. But he has been showing a misunderstanding of we've heard this before. People who insist that there are more voters than there are eligible voters in Michigan. Not true.
Yeah, we identify every voter, of course, when they vote, whether it's through their signature or through an ID. In addition to that, in Michigan, there are 7.2 active registered voters. You can go to michigan.gov/voting dashboard to see all of that data. And there are 7.9 eligible, according to the census. And so that said, we have less active registered voters, 7.2. Then eligible, 7.9. But there are a number of records in our voter registration database of inactive voters, and that's where things get muddied and where people wanting to sow seeds of doubt can combine, wrongly so, but combine all those numbers to say there are more in our records than there actually are.
There is a lot of stuff being spread right now on social media, almost all of which that I see is not true. However, some of it does expose a problem. Matt DePerno, you're familiar with him, of course, shared something this past week. It was he seemed to be suggesting saying with the data that he showed, that he said he had FOIA'd, but that it was showing that someone had voted many, many times. Now, it wasn't true. That's not what happened.
Right.
But you said it was a formatting error that needed to be corrected. This is after that post had been shared, by the way, millions of times, or viewed millions of times.
Yeah. It's a reminder of just how any small thing, like human error, can be extrapolated to mean something that it doesn't, and why we all have to be vigilant in this moment. In that case, I think even Laura Trump debunked it for us and said, no, that's not true. It's been debunked, which was helpful. But yeah, it's a mark of the time that we're in, that people will try to find anything, or even a small formatting error, to try to extrapolate something false out of it, which is why we have to be asking these questions, having these conversations, and really being tuned in to what's actually happening.
These small errors, though, like what happened last time around in Antrim County, they end up defining the moment in an unfortunate way, right?
I would say those spreading misinformation try to make it define the moment, and certainly in some way. But to me, what defines 2020 was not Antrim County. It was that we broke every voter turnout record in the state history, and we saw, even in the midst of a pandemic, people voting. I think this year, when we see early voting taking off, we'll probably see over 1 million people use, for the first time ever, early in-person voting. That, to me, is the story of this election. And I think it's important that we not allow those who want to spread mistruths about the facts to define who we are and what our elections are, which are actually very safe, secure, and accessible.
You recently had a complaint filed against you by the Republican Party chair, Pete Hoekstra. Your Michigan Legacy PAC that you run gave an awful lot of money to the candidacy of Kyra Bolden, who is a state Supreme Court justice, who often has business in front of her involving you. Now, I'm not sure that I can find much that was illegal about it, but it's kind of icky, isn't it, for you to contribute that kind of money to a state Supreme Court justice?
We've given so I should say the Michigan Legacy PAC has donated to a number of pro-democracy candidates who have really stood up for democracy when we wanted to see that. We're in a moment that's going to define the future of our democracy, and so I'm really proud of the work we've done to help ensure citizens know and support candidates who do promote democracy and stand with voters in times like these. So, I think I understand the concerns.
So you can't be blind to the optics here.
No, I understand the concerns, but I also think it's important to make sure voters have information about candidates who are supporting democracy, and that's what those funds actually go to help ensure.
All right, let's talk about where we are right now with the vote that we've already seen coming in. As of Friday, we had, I believe, about 36% of eligible voters in Michigan had already voted.
Yeah.
And this is not a COVID year, because we know how many people voted absentee the last time around. But talk to me about your reflections on what we're watching happening here, and how much of that is now making up what you think the total vote will be.
Well, it remains to be seen how many people will show up and vote on Election Day itself. But to see close to 1 million people probably vote early in person this year is an extraordinary success story, I think, both for our elections and the hard work that local officials have done to educate citizens about this new option, this new right to vote early in person. And to see a lot of people of all ages, all backgrounds, all geographic areas taking advantage of this option, and our clerks stepping up to meet this moment has been really reassuring and encouraging, because even with all of the messiness, all of the misinformation, all of the noise that's really designed to cause us to lose faith in our elections and election officials, still people have been showing up, people have been participating, people have been voting, and my hope is that the results of this election will reflect that broad base of voters in our state.
The people who are voting and who have yet to vote find Robert Kennedy on their ballot. You and I ran out of time on your last visit for you to fully explain his presence on the ballot when he has no desire to be there. Talk a little bit about it. And in fact, a lot of the polls that we see done are only head-to-head polls and don't always include the other people that are on the ballot. We'll wait and see obviously what impact that has. But why shouldn't he be off the ballot in Michigan, as he is in other states?
As a person, I would agree. If someone doesn't want to be on the ballot, they shouldn't be. But the law doesn't allow for an election official to just allow people to withdraw once they have signed up and said, I want to run. In this case, Michigan law is quite clear. If a third party, as in this case the Natural Law Party, nominates a candidate for the presidency and they accept accept, then the law specifically and literally says that candidate cannot withdraw. And the reason, it's to avoid a scenario in which someone fraudulently claims to be a third-party candidate and then withdraws after getting the nomination, leaving that third party out of luck and not having a candidate on the ballot. It's one of the reasons why the Natural Law Party has reinforced the need to keep this individual on the ballot. And again, we've seen candidates attempt to withdraw in lots of different circumstances. In the law, we hold it evenly and we apply it evenly.
You think you would have worked as hard to keep someone on the ballot if they looked as though they were going to damage the campaign of a Democrat?
We make decisions unrelated to the political considerations. We understand people will ascribe political things to it, but the law is the law. It explicitly says you can't withdraw.
Lastly, I want to just give me a take on when you think we're going to know who the winner in Michigan is.
It depends how close the race is. Obviously, if there are recounts and other things like that after the fact. But in terms of the unofficial results, we should know within 24 hours of the polls closing, if not sooner.
Still, that's a long wait, right?
Well,
I mean, why is it longer than it used to be, given that we have advances in technology in this day and
those
age?
help us, and we also have started tabulating those early processing and tabulating those mail-in ballots now. But a lot come in after 4 o'clock, and it takes time to process those ballots that are dropped at the drop box at the last minute, and still count. And so that's really what's happening after 8 o'clock on Election Day. Clerks are still processing and preparing those ballots. We will prioritize security and accuracy over efficiency, but at the same time, I think, and I'm hopeful that we'll see a more efficient process than in past years.
You will probably have a hard time election night not bumping into a Channel 4 microphone and camera around you.
Always happy to talk to you, Devin, or anyone else.
I really appreciate it, Jocelyn
Thanks
Benson.
for having me.
Secretary of State for the State of Michigan will bring in the roundtable right after this. Welcome back. All right, no doubt far too often those of us in the Fourth Estate focus too much on the horse race and not enough on where the horses might take us. I would like us to talk about that this morning. I've got a great group to do that. Joining me, Chad Livengood is the politics editor and columnist for the Detroit News. Abby Mitch is back with us. She's the executive director of Michigan Rising Action. Portia Roberson back with us again. She's the CEO of Focus Hope. And back as well is Stephen Henderson, the host of Created Equal on WDET. And Stephen, let me start with you. If we set aside, and impossible to set aside everything that we've watched happen over this campaign season, when you get down to what you see as being the most dramatic difference, the most dramatic change that would be catalyzed by voting for one candidate or the other, what do you see?
Well, I've been thinking about that question a lot. I think I do subscribe to the idea that this is a fundamental choice about two different Americas. One that is moving along the path that we've been on for about 50 years, which is expanding liberty and inclusion and changing the history, I guess, of this country to be more equitable. And the other is embracing a really dark vision of an exclusionary America, this idea of mass deportations, this idea of anger, constant anger at specific populations of Americans just for being here. I worry about that because the show that I'm going to do on Election Day is about how special this is, what we do, that every 4 years we all cast ballots.
Yeah.
And for the most part, we all believe in the outcome still, and we all believe that this is an intrinsic part of being American.
We overlook that extraordinary thing far too often. Chad, what are you thinking is the biggest difference that hangs in the balance?
I look at a lot of the economic policies right now, and what Donald Trump is offering is diametrically opposed to what Kamala Harris is offering when it comes to the economy and to policy around manufacturing, something that really affects our state maybe more than other states. When Trump is out talking about 20% tariffs on pretty much everything coming into the country. We don't quite have a real grasp about what this looks like. And we also don't know what the effect is. I mean, as that Bloomberg editor brought up in that interview with Trump at the Economic Club of Chicago, kind of the only person to really this whole campaign to ask him, what about the 13 million people who work in an industry that exports something? What's going to happen to their job? And Trump just really couldn't answer that. I mean, he just kind of talked around it. And that's really a big unknown, is if he starts a new trade war with China and other, long time or not just adversaries but also allies, we don't know where this is going to exactly lead down to.
It is interesting, though, that the Biden administration kept many of those tariffs against China in place.
They did,
rather than lifting them.
They did. I mean, I wrote about the one involving the washing machines because it involved Whirlpool, and based in Benton Harbor, a Michigan company that petitioned for them for years and got them. And then what happened was the price of everyone's washing machine and dryers went up by 12%. The dryers is still the most confounding thing. So if you think you can isolate a tariff, you cannot. Because guess what?
They're attached.
As Justin Wolfers at U of M said to me, economist, he said, this is just old-fashioned price gouging. What they did with the dryers.
I love Justin, frequent guest on this program. Portia, what do you see as the biggest difference?
I mean, I think my colleagues here have said it. I mean, the dysfunction that's going to occur if Trump should be reelected, the fact that he has made it very clear that he is going to use his office to get retribution against those who didn't vote for him. I think about what will happen to the city of Detroit, a city that, for the most part is voted Democratic, and whether he will take out that retribution on cities like Detroit across this country. I think we will be fighting to save our democracy. And I don't say that to be dramatic, but I do think that we have seen now what we didn't know in 2016. We've seen what Trump is like as a leader. We recognize that some of the things he said over this campaign season have been very dark and very scary to people. And, I think that we're going to see more of that should he get elected. And it really, I think I'm more anxious about this election than I've ever been about an election.
I think I feel that from every side of this so far. Abby, give me what your take is on what you see the biggest swing is.
So we have seen what a Donald Trump presidency looks like, and its manufacturing sector is up. People have good jobs. People aren't working multiple jobs to pay their bills. I mean, things look pretty okay if you're an American in Trump's 2016 presidency. I'm not sure that where this the sky is falling stuff comes from. What I do think is what you're looking at is, if there's going to be a big loser in a Trump presidency, it's going to be belief in some traditional institutions. I think that that's on the chopping block. I think that Trump represents a belief in the individual. I mean, are we going to empower people to pursue the American dream? Are we going to be a populist country where the freedom of the individual dictates the directions of our institutions, or are our institutions going to define us? Are we going to cling to them to define what our day-to-day life looks like? I mean, a lot of Harris's policies are price controls on core industries. The government's now going to dictate the price of food for people. I mean, that is a huge swing from where we've been as a country, and that, to me, that is what is on the line here.
Stephen, I think that's what I hear a lot from folks who really like Donald Trump. It's that deinstitutionally, getting rid of the system that so many Americans feel like is in place and out of control.
Right, and he's saying, well, I will get control of it, right? I'll take control of it and things will be better. Now, think back to 2016 through 2020. How chaotic was that administration? I mean, how many people were coming and going? How many things were they doing that made no sense at all? How many times were people grabbing things off the president's desk before he could sign it because they're like, actually, that's unconstitutional? This idea of Trump as a controlled force that can manage the economy, immigration, any of these issues better than anyone else, we know to be false. I mean, he's selling that image, and he's very good on the campaign trail at standing up there and saying those things. But as you point out, we have seen what he's like. And there was a lot of chaos from 2016 through 2020. And then, of course, in 2020, once a real crisis hit that demanded leadership, it was a complete disaster.
Israel and Iran weren't fighting. China wasn't openly threatening to take over Taiwan. I mean, things
But a million
seemed
Americans
a lot
died.
better.
Right.
Than,
That part. No, wait.
A million
know,
Americans
Right.
died waiting around for his response to COVID.
well, hold on. That's like a whole separate segment right there. Everything you just said.
And unfortunately, I don't have another
No,
one today.
but let's talk about Abbey Gate if we want to go down the Americans that were left to die rabbit hole. I mean, and also let's go back to no president in human history has ever been exactly what they portray on the campaign trail. Our system of government is complex. But to get back to the essential question, what Harris is portraying is far more centralized in control than anything that Donald Trump and his supporters and the elected officials that support his ideas have ever tried to pass.
Chad, you get the last 10
I should
seconds.
point out that the tariffs are as old as Hamilton in this country. I mean, yeah, he basically invented them, and so that kind of policy, that is central control of the economy.
We got to get to a quick break, so yeah, I'll have one more short segment when we come back right after this. You're right. Prediction time. Who wins Michigan? Who wins the presidency? Stephen.
I think Harris wins Michigan. I don't know who wins the rest of it.
That's honest. Fine.
I think Harris wins Michigan. I think Harris wins the presidency.
Abby.
I think Trump wins the presidency. I think it's very close to call who wins Michigan.
And Chad.
I'm going to punt. I'm out of the prediction business. I got out in 2016, but I do think we're going to have record turnout. We're going to break 2020's records.
That's why I have smart people on Flashpoint, and Chad's one of them, that's for sure. All of you are. Thanks so much for being here. See you next week. Excellent, you guys. Very good.